The Universal Happiness Index broke when humans threw a galaxy-wide surprise party. Part 1. The Universal Happiness Index had been running for 47,000 years without a single major error. It was the pride of the Galactic Concordance, a massive network of thinking crystals that measured how happy every sentient being in the galaxy was at any given moment. The Keeper Archivists, beings made of living crystal who maintained the system, had perfected it over. They could predict when a civilization was about to collapse, when a species was heading toward war, when individuals needed help. The index had saved trillions of lives. Then humanity joined the concordance, and everything started going wrong. Observer Prime noticed the problem first. Was an ant, a species that looked like tall, thin mantises made of silver metal. They were known for their logic and their ability to understand patterns, had been studying species integration for 300 years, and had never seen readings like the ones coming from Earth. Human happiness made no sense. One human would register as deeply unhappy while eating something called ice cream because it was too delicious and now I'll get fat. Another would show extreme joy while watching something sad called a tearjerker movie. Humans reported feeling good pain at the gym, comfortable sadness when it rained, and happy anxiety before their own wedding celebrations. The index couldn't process it. Its algorithms were built on a simple principle. Beings moved toward pleasure and away from pain. Happiness came from safety, resources, social bonds, and purpose. But humans seemed to actively seek out complicated emotions that the index couldn't categorize. Stood in their observation chamber aboard the Concordance station, watching the data streams flow past. Red warnings blinked across the displays. Human readings were corrupting the local happiness measurements. Other species near human colonies were starting to show similar inconsistent patterns. "This is unprecedented," said Keeper Archive, one of the oldest crystal beings in the network. Their facets glowed with concern. "In 47,000 years, we have never encountered a species whose happiness metrics are this chaotic." "Perhaps they are simply unhappy," suggested another keeper. "No," clicked their mandibles in the ant gesture for confusion. "They report being very happy. They just express it in ways that break our measurement systems. Look at this." Pulled up a recording from a human space station. A group of humans were gathered in a room, laughing hysterically while watching one of their own fail repeatedly to hit a small object with a stick while blindfolded. The human who was failing was laughing hardest of all. "They are mocking their companion's failure," observed. "This should register as social ostracism and shame." "But it doesn't," said. "The human being mocked reports feeling loved and included. They call this a party game. And that word keeps appearing in our data. Party. We need to understand what it means." The Concordance Council decided to send to Earth directly. If anyone could decode the human happiness problem, it would be the ant observer, accepted the assignment with the confidence of their species. They had solved puzzles far more complex than one confusing civilization. Earth was overwhelming. The moment stepped off the transport in New Geneva, they were assaulted by chaos. Humans rushed in every direction with no apparent coordination. Music played from dozens of sources, all different songs. Colors and lights flashed from every surface. The ambient happiness reading in the index was spiking and plummeting randomly, sometimes second by second. "Welcome to Earth," a human woman approached, smiling with all her teeth showing. Had learned this was a friendly gesture, though it looked threatening to most species. "I'm Ambassador Maria Santos. We're so excited to have you here." "Your excitement is measurable," observed. "Your stress hormones are also elevated. You are tired and have not eaten in 7 hours, yet you report feeling happy." Maria laughed. "Yeah, it's been a crazy day, but crazy can be fun. Come on, I'll show you around." Over the following weeks, tried to understand. Maria took them to restaurants where humans paid to eat food so spicy it caused them pain. yet they smiled while tears ran down their faces. They visited sporting events where thousands of humans screamed themselves hoarse supporting teams that statistically would lose half the time, yet they called it a great time either way. They attended something called a comedy show, where a human stood on a stage and talked about their own failures and embarrassments while the audience laughed. "But why do you enjoy this?" asked after the show. The comedian discussed painful memories, financial hardship, relationship failures, social awkwardness. "Because it's relatable," Maria explained. "We've all been there. Laughing about it together makes it hurt less. It creates connection." "The index is designed to prevent pain and maximize comfort," said, "but you seem to use pain as a social bonding tool." "Sometimes," Maria agreed, "but that's not all we do. Here, let me show you something." She took to her apartment building, where they rode an elevator to the 15th floor. Maria knocked on a door, which opened to reveal an elderly human woman with silver hair. "This is my grandmother," Maria said. "Hello," clicked politely. A bug alien clapped her hands. "How wonderful, come in, I just made cookies." The apartment was small and filled with objects that seemed to serve no practical purpose. Photographs covered the walls, fabric draped the furniture, plants grew in pots by the windows. Readings showed that lived alone, had limited financial resources, and was in declining health. By all index metrics, she should have been deeply unhappy. Yet hummed while she moved around her tiny kitchen, pulling out plates and pouring drinks. She talked constantly, asking questions about their species, telling stories about her youth, laughing at her own jokes. "Your grandmother is happy," observed quietly to Maria. "Why, she has so little." "She has what matters," Maria said. "Memories, purpose, people who visit, and she's about to have something else." "What?" Maria checked her communication device and grinned. "Just wait." Suddenly, the apartment door burst open. Humans poured in, at least 20 of them, carrying packages and food and making noise. They were all shouting the same word: surprise. Gasped, then burst into tears. But her happiness reading spiked so high that personal scanner actually glitched. Was crying and laughing at the same time, hugging every human who entered. "Happy birthday, Grandma," Maria kissed cheek. "Did we surprise you?" "I had no idea," was still crying laughing. "You said you couldn't visit this week." Watched in fascination as chaos unfolded. Humans talked over each other, played loud music, ate, danced, and laughed. The happiness readings in the room were unlike anything had seen. They were high and sustained, but also mixed with other emotions. Nostalgia as humans looked at old photographs. Bittersweet feelings as they discussed family members who had died. Joy tinged with the knowledge that herself would not live many more years. It was messy and complicated and completely beautiful. "This is a party," said aloud. "This is a surprise party," Maria corrected. "We planned it in secret so Grandma wouldn't know. The surprise makes it better." "But you deliberately created uncertainty and information from your grandmother. That should have caused you stress and caused her worry." "It did," Maria admitted, "but it was worth it. Look at her face." Sat in the center of the room, surrounded by her family, glowing with happiness that the index could measure but not truly quantify. That night back at the hotel, sent a long report to the Concordance Council. They explained what they had learned. Humans didn't just experience happiness, they created it. They engineered situations designed to generate joy, even if those situations involved risk, surprise, or temporary discomfort. But what troubled more was a realization that had been growing for weeks. They had been traveling across Earth, observing humans in their natural habitat, and had noticed something about the galaxy in comparison. The galaxy was stable, peaceful, prosperous. The index had optimized everything perfectly. Species lived in harmony, resources were distributed efficiently, conflicts were predicted and prevented. but in all their 300 years of life had never seen an ant cry with joy like had. They had never seen their people dance or throw surprise parties or laugh until their bodies shook. The galaxy was content, but it wasn't happy. Not like this. The next morning, Maria found on the hotel balcony, watching the sunrise over Lake Geneva. "You look troubled," Maria said. "I am beginning to understand the problem," replied. "The index measures happiness as the absence of suffering, but humans measure happiness as the presence of joy. Those are not the same thing." "No," Maria agreed, "they're not." "When was the last galaxy-wide celebration?" asked suddenly. Maria frowned. "What do you mean?" "In human culture, you celebrate birthdays, holidays, achievements, even arbitrary dates. When did the entire galaxy last celebrate something together?" Maria thought about it. Then she pulled out her communication device and searched through galactic records. She searched for 10 minutes, then 20. Finally, she looked up with surprise on her face. "Never," she said. "There's no record of a galaxy-wide celebration, ever." "Why would there be?" said. "We have optimized for predictable outcomes. Why celebrate what is expected?" Maria's eyes got a particular gleam that had learned to recognize. It usually preceded something chaotic. "The Universal Happiness Index has been running for 47,000 years, Maria said slowly. "That's coming up on 50,000 soon. That's a big number, a big milestone." "Yes," agreed, uncertain where this was going. "And nobody's planning to celebrate it." "Why would they? It has simply continued functioning as designed." Maria grinned, that all-teeth human smile that now understood meant mischief. "Then we should throw it a party, a surprise party, for the whole galaxy." Scanner glitched again. "That is, you cannot possibly." "Why not?" Maria was already packing, gesturing with her hands the way humans did when they had ideas. "We'll invite every species. We'll make it a surprise. We'll celebrate 50,000 years of peace and prosperity. We'll throw the biggest party the galaxy has ever seen." "The biggest party the galaxy has ever seen would be the first party the galaxy has ever seen," pointed out. "Even better, we'll make it one to remember." "The Council will never approve this." Maria pulled out her communication device. "Let's find out." Part 2. The Concordance Council chambers were designed for calm deliberation. Thousands of species had their representatives there, arranged in careful hierarchical circles based on their integration dates. The lighting was optimized for every type of vision. The temperature zones were perfectly balanced. Everything was peaceful and orderly. Until Ambassador Maria Santos made her proposal. "A surprise party," repeated Council Head Hen, their translator struggling with the concept. Hen was a methane breather, a species that lived in gas clouds and looked like swirling patterns of vapor. "You wish to throw a surprise party for the entire galaxy. To celebrate 50,000 years of the Universal Happiness Index," Maria said. "It's a huge milestone. We should mark it somehow." "The index marks itself," said another council member, "a being made of living stone called a. It processes its own data. There is no need for external celebration." "But don't you want to celebrate?" Maria asked. "Don't you want to acknowledge this amazing achievement? 50,000 years of peace and prosperity and cooperation. That's incredible." The council members looked at each other with whatever sensory organs they possessed. Several translated whispers passed through the chamber. Finally, Hen spoke again. "We do not understand the purpose of this celebration. What goal does it serve? How does it optimize any measurable outcome?" Maria took a breath. She had prepared for this. "It serves the goal of happiness, real happiness, the kind that comes from sharing joy with others." "The index already measures happiness," the rumbled. "We are at optimal levels." "Respectfully," Maria said, "I don't think you are. I've been studying galactic culture for months now. Everyone is content. Everyone is satisfied, but I haven't seen anyone truly joyful. When's the last time any of you danced? Danced, or sang for fun, or played games, or threw a party, or did anything spontaneous just because it felt good? Silence filled the chamber. Maria pressed her advantage. The index has given you stability. It's prevented suffering. That's wonderful. But it hasn't given you joy, and I think the galaxy deserves both. More whispers, more consultation. Observer Prime stood beside Maria, their mandibles clicking nervously. They had agreed to support Maria's proposal, though they still weren't entirely sure it was wise. "We will vote," Hen announced finally. "All those in favor of allowing humanity to organize this surprise party for the galaxy." The vote was closer than Maria expected. Many species were curious about this human custom. Others were simply confused enough to see what would happen. In the end, the motion passed by a narrow margin. "You may proceed with your celebration," Hen said. "But understand, the Keeper Archivists have expressed concerns about introducing chaos into optimized systems. You will be held responsible for any disruptions." "Understood," Maria said, grinning. "Thank you." As they left the chambers, clicked their mandibles anxiously. "Do you understand what you have committed to? A galaxy-wide event. How will you even begin?" "The way humans always begin," Maria said. "We'll ask for help and make it up as we go." The planning began immediately. Maria sent messages to every human colony, station, and ship in the galaxy. The response was overwhelming. Humans loved parties, and this was the ultimate party challenge. Within days, thousands of humans had volunteered to help. But they would need more than just human help. Maria began reaching out to other species, carefully explaining the concept without ruining the surprise for the galaxy at large. The methane breathers of Titan were first. Maria called their representative, a swirling pattern that called itself Whisper. "We want to create visual displays," Maria explained. "Fireworks, but on a galactic scale. Your people can manipulate gases and control atmospheric reactions. Could you create beautiful patterns in nebulas that would be visible across light years?" Whisper swirled thoughtfully. "This is possible, but why? What purpose does beauty serve?" "It makes people happy," Maria said simply. "It takes their breath away. It makes them stop and stare and feel something." "Feel what?" "Wonder, joy, connection to something bigger than themselves." Whisper was silent for a long moment. Then, "My people have never created beauty for its own sake. We have only optimized our environments for survival and comfort. I think we would like to try." Next came the engineers of Station, a species of energy beings who could manipulate gravitational fields. Maria had an idea. "Music," she told them, "but not just sound. Gravitational waves that every species could feel, regardless of their sensory organs. A song that the whole galaxy could experience together." The engineers consulted among themselves. This would require enormous energy expenditure. The calculations alone would take months, and for what return? "For the experience," Maria said. "For the memory, for the story you'll tell afterwards." One of the engineers, a brilliant pulse of light named Frequency, spoke up. "I have studied human music. The mathematics are fascinating. The patterns meaningless yet meaningful. I would like to attempt this translation." The photosynthetic were easier to convince. They were plant-based beings who covered entire planets with their interconnected consciousness. Maria asked them to bloom. "All at once," she explained. "Every garden world. Coordinate your flowers to create colors visible from space. Make your worlds into art." The response was enthusiastic. "We have always bloomed in cycles, in optimized patterns for maximum resource efficiency. But to bloom for beauty, for celebration, this sounds delightful." Week by week, the plan came together. Humans worked around the clock, coordinating with dozens of species, planning the logistics of the largest surprise party in galactic history. They kept it secret from the general galactic population, which was harder than Maria expected. Humans were terrible at keeping secrets, it turned out. Several times the surprise almost leaked, but they managed to maintain it. But not everyone was happy about the preparations. In the crystalline chambers deep within the Concordance station, the keeper archivists watched their displays with growing alarm. The oldest of them called an emergency meeting. "The index is destabilizing," they announced. "Human activity is creating cascading anomalies across multiple sectors." The displays showed red warnings scattered across the galaxy. Wherever humans were coordinating party preparations, the index was showing strange readings. Stress indicators were up, but so were happiness markers. Resource allocation was becoming inefficient, but satisfaction levels weren't dropping. Productivity was down in some sectors, but social cohesion was increasing. It was all contradictory, all impossible by the index's standards. "The humans are introducing chaos," another keeper said. "Organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. They are deliberately creating uncertainty and surprise. These are variables the index was designed to minimize, not maximize." Observer Prime has filed multiple reports, noted. They claim this chaos is intentional, that uncertainty can create positive emotions. Impossible. The index has proven that beings seek stability and predictability. Surprise is a threat response. And yet, facets glowed with something that might have been curiosity. The humans continue to register as happy despite their stress. They are working harder than necessary, sacrificing efficiency, creating problems for themselves on purpose, and they report enjoying it. 3 months into the planning, the index's warnings reached critical levels. The keeper archivists demanded an audience with the Concordance Council. "This party must be stopped," announced. "The stability of the index is at risk. We are seeing pattern degradation across multiple sectors. If this continues, we may lose the ability to accurately measure galactic happiness." Maria stood to respond. She had expected this. The index is struggling because it's encountering something new, but that doesn't mean it's breaking. It means it's learning. The index does not learn, it measures. Then maybe that's the problem. Maria pulled up her own data displays. "I've been studying galactic happiness metrics for the past 3 months. You know what I found? Nothing. No variation, no peaks, no valleys, just a flat line of contentment that's barely changed in centuries." "That indicates perfect optimization," said. "That indicates no life." Maria's voice rose with passion. "Happiness isn't a flat line. It's peaks and valleys. It's the high after the low. It's the joy that means something because you've also known sadness. You've optimized all the feeling out of the galaxy." "We have optimized suffering out of the galaxy," the council member corrected. "That is our purpose." "But you took joy with it." Maria looked around the chamber. "When's the last time any of you felt excited about something? When's the last time you looked forward to something so much you couldn't sleep? When's the last time you were surprised in a good way?" Silence. "The party stays," Maria said firmly. "We're too far into preparations to stop now anyway. Half the galaxy is involved even if they don't know it yet. And honestly, I think you need this. All of you. You've been content for so long that you've forgotten how to be happy." The council voted again. This time it was even closer. But the party was allowed to continue, with one condition. If the index crashed completely, humanity would be held responsible for the consequences. Maria agreed. She had no choice. Back in her office, found her staring at star charts, coordinating the final details. "Are you certain about this?" asked. "If the index fails, we will have no way to monitor galactic well-being. Civilizations could collapse before we detect the warnings." "I know," Maria said quietly. "It's a huge risk." "Then why take it?" Maria turned to look at them. "Because I've seen what it's like when you don't take risks, when you optimize everything, when you make everything safe and predictable. You know what you get. Peace, prosperity, contentment. A galaxy that's forgotten how to celebrate, Maria finished. A galaxy that's alive but not really living, and I think that's the saddest thing I've ever seen. Was quiet for a long moment. Then, in 300 years of life I have never celebrated anything. Not my hatching day, not my achievements, not the achievements of my civilization. We simply existed and performed our functions. And how did that feel? I thought it felt satisfactory, but now I am not certain I know what satisfaction is supposed to feel like. His mandibles clicked in what Maria had learned was their equivalent of a sad smile. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps we need to remember how to feel. The party was set for 3 weeks away. Every human in the galaxy knew it was coming. Thousands of aliens were in on the secret now too, all working together to pull off the surprise. The methane breathers were ready with their nebula displays. The engineers had composed their gravitational symphony. They were preparing to bloom across 100 worlds simultaneously. Maria barely slept. She coordinated with teams across the galaxy, double-checked every detail, and worried constantly about what would happen if this all went wrong. The night before the party found her on the observation deck of the Concordance station, staring out at the stars. "Cannot sleep?" they asked. "Too nervous," Maria admitted. "What if nobody likes it? What if the index really does crash? What if I've made a terrible mistake?" "Then you will have made it while trying to bring joy to trillions of beings," said. "That is not such a terrible way to fail. You've gotten more philosophical since you met us humans. I have learned much from your species, including the concept of anxiety," clicked in amusement. "I am experiencing it right now. It is unpleasant yet somehow also exciting." Maria laughed despite her nervousness. "Welcome to being human. We live in that space between anxiety and excitement pretty much constantly." "How do you bear it?" "We throw parties," Maria said with a grin. "Speaking of which, we should probably get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be the biggest day in galactic history. Or the biggest disaster. Sometimes those are the same thing." They stood together, human and alien, looking out at the galaxy that had no idea what was about to happen. Somewhere out there, trillions of beings were living their optimized, predictable lives. By this time tomorrow, everything would change. Maria hoped she was doing the right thing. But even if she wasn't, at least she was doing something. At least she was trying to shake the galaxy awake and remind it what it felt like to truly feel. The countdown began, 24 hours until the surprise. Part 3. The clock reached 2200 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Maria stood in the command center aboard the Concordance station, surrounded by dozens of humans and aliens, all watching their screens with anticipation. Her finger hovered over the transmission button. "Everyone ready?" she asked. Nods and affirmative sounds came from around the room. Whisper, the methane breather, swirled with nervous energy. Frequency, the engineer, pulsed with anticipation, even clicked their mandibles anxiously. Maria took a breath and pressed the button. The message went out across every communication channel in the galaxy simultaneously. Every screen, every display, every device capable of receiving transmissions suddenly showed the same thing. Millions of humans on thousands of worlds, all shouting together. "Surprise! You're all invited to the biggest party in the galaxy." For exactly 3 seconds, nothing happened. The galaxy processed this unexpected information. Then everything happened at once. In the crystalline chambers of the Keeper Archivists, every display turned red. Alarms blared across the facility. Watched in horror as the Universal Happiness Index began to fluctuate wildly. Confusion. The dominant emotion lighting up across the galaxy was confusion. Trillions of beings simultaneously trying to understand what was happening. The index wasn't designed for simultaneous galactic confusion. Its processing power strained. Then surprise. Wave after wave of surprise as beings realized this was real, this was happening. Humans were doing something inexplicable again. The index is approaching cascade failure, one of the keepers announced. We need to shut it down. Wait, said, watching the data with fascination despite their alarm. Look at the secondary readings. Beneath the confusion and surprise, something else was emerging: curiosity, interest, and from some sectors, something the index had barely registered in decades: excitement. On the concordance station, Maria watched the responses flood in. Questions mostly, confusion certainly, but nobody was panicking, nobody was scared, they were just wondering what came next. Phase 2, Maria said. Across the galaxy, the party began in earnest. Human ships appeared in every major system, broadcasting music. But this wasn't just any music. The engineers released their gravitational symphony, waves of organized gravity that every species could feel in their bones, their cells, their very atoms. It was music that transcended hearing, that every being in the galaxy could experience regardless of their sensory capabilities. An ant on there stopped in the middle of their work, feeling the gravitational waves wash over them. They had never experienced anything like it. The waves were organized, patterned, but also wild and joyful. They felt it in their silver metal body, and something inside them responded, something they didn't know existed. In the Abyss sector, the dwellers, who hadn't communicated with the rest of the galaxy in 3 centuries, felt the gravitational music reach their void. In their lightless world, they experienced organized sound for the first time. One of them, so old they had forgotten their own age, sent a message to the concordance. What is this? Why does it make us feel pleasant? The methane breathers ignited the nebulas. Clouds of gas billions of kilometers across suddenly burst into coordinated patterns of light and color. They created cascading rainbows visible across light years, patterns that bloomed and evolved and danced across the darkness of space. A merchant ship captain, a crystalline being called a refract, was traveling between systems when the nebula beside their route suddenly exploded with color. They stopped their ship, which they had never done before outside of emergencies. They sat at their console and watched the display for 20 minutes, forgetting about their schedule, forgetting about their cargo, forgetting about everything except the beauty unfolding before them. They began their bloom. 100 garden worlds across the galaxy burst into simultaneous flower. Planets that were typically green and practical suddenly erupted in colors: brilliant reds, electric blues, shimmering purples. From orbit, the planets looked like jewels, like art, like living paintings. On Prime, a young shoot who had never bloomed outside their assigned schedule felt the call. They bloomed with the rest of their world, and for the first time understood why their ancient ancestors had sung about the joy of flowering. It wasn't just biology. It was expression. It was beauty for its own sake. And everywhere, on every human station and ship, the doors opened. Invitations went out to every being in range. Free food, tailored to each species' biochemistry. Free entertainment. Free music and dancing and games and all the chaotic, wonderful things humans did when they celebrated. At first, nobody came. The aliens stood outside human establishments, confused and uncertain. This violated every protocol. You didn't just wander into unknown situations. The index hadn't predicted this. There was no data on how to respond. Then someone took the first step. A young, barely formed, waddled into a human celebration center on Europa. The humans cheered at their arrival, offered them mineral supplements that met nutritional needs, and showed them something called dancing. The young didn't understand dancing, but they watched humans move to the rhythm of the music, watched them spin and jump and laugh, and something about it resonated. They began to shift their rocky body back and forth, approximating the movement. The humans cheered louder. The young felt something they had never felt before. They were being celebrated just for existing, just for trying, just for being there. It made them feel included, important, happy. They sent a message to their family, "You must come see this." That was how it started. One being, then another, then groups, then entire communities. Aliens began flooding into human celebrations across the galaxy. They tried the food, experienced the music, attempted the games. Most didn't understand what was happening, but they felt the energy, the joy, the infectious enthusiasm of the humans and the growing number of other species joining in. In the Keeper Archivist's chambers, the Universal Happiness Index crashed. Watched the displays go dark, one by one, as the system overloaded. They had been right. This was exactly what they had feared. The index couldn't handle this much simultaneous, chaotic emotion. It was cascading into failure. "Activate backup systems," one of the keepers shouted. "Backup systems are failing too. We're losing monitoring capability across all sectors." Should have been panicking. Without the index, they had no way to detect civilization collapse, predict wars, prevent disasters. They were flying blind for the first time in 50,000 years. But wasn't panicking. They were watching the raw data feeds, the unprocessed information flooding in from across the galaxy, and what they saw was astonishing. Nobody was fighting. Nobody was collapsing. Despite the chaos, despite the surprise, despite the complete disruption of every predictable routine, beings across the galaxy were fine. Better than fine. The sensors showed ants attempting to dance, their rigid metal bodies moving in ways they never had before. Dwellers were communicating with other species for the first time in centuries, asking questions about the music, the lights, the celebration. We're playing party games with humans. We're teaching aliens how to appreciate flowers. Methane breathers were creating new artistic patterns in their home clouds, inspired by the joy of creation for its own sake. "I don't understand," one of the younger keepers said. "Why isn't there chaos? Why isn't there fear?" "Because," said slowly, "there is something more powerful than fear happening." "What?" "Joy." On the Concordance station, Maria was crying. Happy tears ran down her face as she watched the feeds from across the galaxy. It was working. It was actually working. Beings were coming together, celebrating together, experiencing joy together. Approached her, moving in an odd shuffling pattern they had been practicing for weeks. "What are you doing?" Maria asked through her tears. "Dancing," said. "Badly, I think. But the human coordinator said that bad dancing is still dancing and it counts." Maria laughed and hugged them, which still startled even after months of exposure to human tactile affection. "Is it supposed to feel like this?" asked quietly. "This feeling in my core processing, this lightness." "That's happiness," Maria said. "Real happiness. It's quite intense." "Yeah, it can be." They stood together, watching the screens as the party spread across the galaxy. The visual feeds showed thousands of different celebrations happening simultaneously, all unique, all chaotic, all beautiful. A message came in from the Concordance Council. Hen's voice was different than Maria had ever heard it, warmer somehow, more energetic. "Ambassador Santos," they said, "what have you done?" "I threw a party," Maria said simply. "Did you come?" "I am experiencing it now. There are humans in the methane sectors. They are wearing breathing apparatus and celebrating in our clouds. They cannot breathe our atmosphere comfortably, yet they came anyway. Why would they do this?" "Because celebrating together is more important than being comfortable," Maria said. "Are you having fun?" There was a long pause. Then, "I do not know if I have ever had fun before, but I think I might be having it now." The party continued for hours, then days. Species that had never interacted began communicating, sharing stories, learning each other's customs. The rigid social hierarchies of the Concordance began to blur as beings realized that in a party, everyone was equal. Everyone was welcome. Everyone could participate. In the crystalline chambers, the Keeper Archivists worked frantically to restart the index. They tried 17 times. Each time, the system would boot up, run for a few seconds, and crash again. On the 18th attempt,